Okay, this is an orange, and I've cut it into pieces. Well, there's one piece that's hanging out there, and I've cut it into pieces. And even though it's in pieces, it still serves its purpose. The initial purpose was on the tree was to be flowered into a fruit, and so it served its purpose. It now became a fruit, and there's a purpose for the fruit. Now I've just cut it into sections here, and even in sections it still serves a purpose. And these pieces, when I eat of these pieces, the purpose is that it's going to provide some kind of nutrient for my body. And today, over the next couple of weeks, I want to talk about how you can be start out in life a certain way, and all of a sudden life is just shattered, and you begin to think that, will I ever make it? Let me just wipe my hands here. You begin to look at those pieces as they're splattered and shattered all over the place, and sometimes you start to question whether you can those pieces can ever be pulled back together again. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my experiences, and how even in spite of the challenges of life, that when those pieces, when my life splattered or shattered, how I was able to, with the help of the Lord, begin to pull those pieces back together. And it has been a journey. And I'm going to be sharing from this book, which is one of my books, and it's called Abuse, the Results, the Plan, and the Victory. And I'm going to read to you a couple of pages, and I want to do that to just kind of kick this off. And I'm hoping that I'll read in a way that it won't be boring to you, but that it'll hold your interest in some way. And so I'm excited about what's going to happen, because I think when life shatters, that we oftentimes have trouble picking up the pieces, and sometimes we develop bad habits to replace the pieces that have been shattered, and those things sometimes need to we need to do something different with the pieces that were shattered, and we just don't know what to do. We get a little bit confused. And so I'm going to start off today by reading from my book, and I'll start on page 3, and it says, I was not prepared for my parents' separation. I heard people talk, but things looked okay from a child's perspective. I remember times when my mother and father argued how he never took her seriously. Daddy smiled all the time. Even when they argued, nothing seemed to bother him. Daddy and I had been close at one time, at least so I believed. He made me feel that I was more special than Mother. I wasn't close with my mother because Mother allowed Grandma Maggie to favor me over the other children. I was confused as to who this lady I called Mom really was. I have no negative memories of my father. He wasn't violent or abusive. He drank a lot and liked to party. I thought we were a happy family, nothing for a kid to worry about. The breakup did come, and we kids went to live with my dad's parents, Maggie and Grandpa Johnson. Maggie worked at a fish factory. Maggie and Grandpa Johnson, well, Grandpa Johnson didn't work. He had a stroke which affected his left side long before I was born. They lived in a small house back in the woods on a lake with lots of fig, pecan, peach, and apple trees. There were good times there. Grandpa Johnson took a lot of time with me. I was his favorite child. He always seemed to single me out and show me special attention over the other children. All of my life, all I ever heard was how special I was to Grandpa Johnson and Maggie. A few months after we went to live with them, Grandma Maggie died while working in the fish factory. It was a shock. She dropped dead. I thought, why now? All I could think about was what was going to happen to us. No one seemed to care about us except Maggie and Grandpa Johnson. And I was thinking about what I should call this. I know in the book I call it, when I have one subtitle, but as I'm beginning this series, I think I'll call This Is Not the End. And so my life story is not unusual. You heard things in there about being special, and that special attention that I got from this one particular person, which was my grandfather. And you heard the tragedy of my grandmother dying suddenly, and here we are, kids, and I'm the oldest, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, Mom and Dad are gone, so where does that leave us? And there are times when people lose sight, but when you're in a battle for your life, you just do what you need to do. And I think that children learn to make adjustments real quick. Some children, maybe not all children, but I learned to make adjustments real quick. The truth of the matter is that life changes, and it changes no matter what type of family you come up in, whether it's a rich family, a middle income family, or a poor family. Life can change at the drop of a hat, so to speak. And when life changes, then you have to do something. Even as a child, when life changes, something has to happen. And as I was thinking about this, I suddenly the story came to mind about Adam and Eve. And so I went back and I started rereading. I reread that story in chapter 3 of Genesis. And I thought to myself, after I finished reading it, I said, wow, so what happens when the serpent slithers into your life? When he comes into your life like he came into Eve's life and Adam's life. So what happens? What can we expect from him when he comes into our lives? And we can expect something. And my parents they weren't watching when he slithered in. And I had no idea who he was because he's totally invisible at this point. We are given a picture of him in the garden with Adam and Eve. But I'm just sort of wondering, like, okay, well, what is going on here? So when the serpent comes, what does he do? Now, when you go back and you get a chance to reread that story, you reread that story and you will begin to get, I hope, a picture of this serpent slithering into their lives. And what does he bring? He brings wrong thoughts. He brings confusion. He brings misunderstanding, pleasure seeking. He brings fear. He brings isolation. There's a disconnect. And you can see what happened there in the garden. There was a disconnect that took place between Adam and Eve and God. And so let's take a look at your life for a minute. And what do you see when you take a look in your life? When you take a look in your life, yes, you're going to see I was just I have some notes because I want to stay on track with this. Okay, so you forgive me if I flip a page every now and again. But anyway, what do we see? What do you see in your life? Did you come up with confusion? Did you come up with misunderstanding? Do you have fears in your life? Do you have wrong thoughts? And that was me. I had a lot of wrong thoughts coming up, and thoughts just kept invading my mind all the time. And so when that happens, who has you? Has the serpent now begun to take over your mind and just keeps feeding you and feeding you and feeding you? How long are you going to give him the authority over you through your past and the things that are taking place? I mean, for a long time, I dwelled on the fact that my parents, they separated and how I felt and all of that. I mean, that was just, I just kept playing that scene over and over in my mind, playing the scene with my grandpa over and over in my mind, playing the scene of the tragedies over and over in my mind. So if you need to go back to that story so that you could see that what has happened with your life is not, you're not the first person that this has happened to. There are many people like you who've experienced similar things to you. And if you go on the internet and search, you think, okay, I'm not by myself. There's a lot of people going through a lot of things. And what happened in my life was that the serpent slithered in by way of my grandfather first beginning to molest me, and then my parents separate and they go their separate ways. And so here I am, this kid, and I'm totally unaware. And that's what happens in our lives. We just forget, because he's so invisible, we forget that he has come, we forget that there's something else operating behind the scenes that we can't see. And so that was my first experience. My first experience was the serpent coming in through my grandfather, then through my parents, and then later on through other people. Now, understand something. Did my parents know that this serpent was there, and that the serpent was kind of feeding them a little bit and setting up things so that they could act and they could follow through on them? No, I don't think my parents knew that. What they knew was they thought they were operating through their own selfishness. He played on their selfishness. Oh, well, you don't love her anymore, so you don't love him anymore. Hey, why don't y'all just go ahead and split and go your separate ways? You go over here, she goes over there. And, what about the kids? Oh, nobody thinks about the kids. Oh, this is all about us right now. The kids, they'll get over it. And they'll manage, okay? And so what they did is they listened and they follow through. Nothing was more important than their own self-preservation, their own way of their own survival and what they wanted. That was the most important thing to them. And so they were following their plan. They were seeking pleasure, and and their desires, they wanted their desires to be met. They weren't really thinking about us as the four kids in this relationship. But this is not the end. Keep the faith. Hang with me, because something else is coming after this. And I just want to say to you, maybe if you like what I've been saying so far, and as I'm starting out here, share this with some of your friends, and maybe like it so that we can move along here. Whatever the situation is, maybe you can do that. And if you indeed want to do that, then I would appreciate you doing that, because that would just mean so much more, so much to me by having you do that. And so, hey, here it is. Keep the faith. Blondie Clayton, Coach Blondie Clayton, signing off. God bless.